Hello and welcome to Talk Hockey Radio's EHL wrap-up episode. It's me taking over hosting duties today because I have upgraded from Taff and Simon. I am joined by one of the voices of the EHL, Simon Mason. So we had several days of top-level hockey across in Den Bosch. You obviously called a few of the games.
Yeah, whole thing. So I think I had 4 games off, so I did 22 out of 26. So yeah, still a majority of the hockey, most of which was good. So it was another fabulous long weekend. I mean, now it's 6 days with the women's final 12. It's kind of that whole pleasurable experience of it building to a fantastic crescendo, but the chance to see a few new teams at the beginning.
Absolutely. So to spoil the ending for anyone who didn't happen to catch social media, which for a hockey point of view was pretty much taken over by the EHL over the Easter weekend, we had new champions in the women's in Stixer and returning champions for the men's in Kampong, with Gantoise coming second in the men's, Den Bosch coming second in the women's, and then Mannheimer taking bronze for the women and Amsterdam taking bronze for the men's. So we'll go through the entire run of play in a minute, but do you think those were fair reflections of the performances that we saw going through?
I don't think a fair reflection. The thing with winning any competition is it's not about a single outstanding game. If you'd asked me at the end of day 2, because day 1 was just the women's qualifying games, there wasn't really anything in day 1 that would have gone, there's a potential champion, which is interesting because actually the women's actual champion did play on day 1. But it wasn't obvious. It was a comfortable win for them. And for the other games, you're like, well, there's nothing really here that suggests anybody's going to come out of this. The men's then, the early game, Amsterdam in their first game, at the end of that, if you'd said pick a winner, I'd have gone done. I mean, the way they took Hamburger Polo out was just incredible. They were outstanding. And then again on that day 2 when Den Bosch played, you were like, they are so good. I mean, they are a different class. Okay, it was against Watsonians, but at that point, I was like, well, I'm pretty certain this has got Amsterdam and Den Bosch all over it. But then as the tournament goes on, fatigue creeps in, errors creep in, the fantastic story of Kampong men who are having a dismal season in the league, and then it all comes true. So there's so many little intricacies that early on in the tournament, you'd have put your money on if you're a betting person, and then it changed. So that's the beauty of the EHL, is there's so many incredible standout singular games and some absolute dross, to be fair, but incredible games, and then it turns on its head, and the incredible game becomes the teams in an incredible game become awful the next day.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think from the early stages, I think I definitely would have agreed that I thought it was Amsterdam's in the men's to win. Den Bosch, again, class whenever they come out.
Yeah, and to be fair to Den Bosch, it wasn't like they lost by playing badly. They happened to then come up against Stixer in the final. They tried to play in a particular way. Stixer have obviously got Yibi Janssen on corners. They didn't give many corners, but they gave enough for her to get one. And then it was, as women's EHL finals go, it wasn't a great, neutral, inspiring, fabulous thing. It was a very much a chess-like performance that was 2 teams who knew each other really well, and sometimes they do cancel each other out, and they did. And Den Bosch knew that they weren't going to win that game 5-4, and if they played in an open manner, they were going to get done. So they didn't, and then unfortunately they weren't able to unlock Stixer. Well, I'm sure we'll come back to it in a bit, but they weren't able to unlock Stixer, and so consequently it was a bit almost too little too late. Once Stixer got that goal, it's like, how are you going to get back into this? And by that point, their momentum had gone.
So we'll jump in and we'll run through day by day, as it were. So the opening day, we had the women's playing games. So we had Railway Union, Watsonians, Slavia Prague, Gantoise, Reading, Mannheimer, and Stixer, Igara. I think safe to say going into day 1, you could have pretty much picked who was going to go through. Some of the scorelines did catch me off guard. I mean, the Gantoise 9-0 run out, I thought maybe they'd have got to 5-6, eased off a little bit, knowing that they had the game in the bag.
Yeah, but there is that question. The problem with Slavia Prague is that they've got 4 or 5 very, very, very high quality indoor players had just come off the back of their indoor season, and therefore Gantoise were scoring goals for the fun of it. They weren't having to play particularly hard to get those goals. Amber Ballinghain also then scoring 5. Everything she touched seemed to turn into a goal. So I can see your point. And in other games where teams were working really hard to get a 2 or 3 goal lead, then taking their foot off the gas, but Slavia Prague just weren't. They weren't the racers. They didn't have the physicality. They were weak in their outside their non-high quality recognizable players. They just didn't really function, and so there was gaps all over the pitch for a team like Gantoise who exploited it. Reading then, they found out on their European debut, they found out how you get punished when you make mistakes, because actually I don't think they played particularly badly. It certainly didn't feel like a 4-0 game, but they made 2 early-ish errors and both of them became goals, bang bang, and suddenly you're chasing a game, and you realise that if you give up cheap ball and cheap opportunities to some of Europeans' best players, they'll take those chances. And consequently, when they take those chances, you're then goals down, you're then chasing, and you don't necessarily have the depth of experience, not ability, but experience. And experience is a massive thing at a tournament like this. So that was no surprise. Watsonians, the nature of the scoreline against Roa Union, I think was more than people would have predicted for a debut team coming in. But again, played really well. Roa Union were unfortunately undone by both circles, as is so often the case, is that they had multiple chances in the attacking circle, didn't take them, and then shipped a couple of really cheap goals, and Watsonians then ran away with it. And Stix Vergara, last game of the day, Yibi Janssen just showed how good she is. Basically, you give her enough opportunities to score 4, as she did, and Agara had no answer to that.
No. Interestingly, some of the stats that has kind of been prepared for me by editor Tommy. Stixer were 47% success rate for penalty corners, which is very close to double the tournament average for both men's and women's, which sits around 25%.
Yep.
So I think it just shows the quality that Yibi Janssen is bringing to penalty corners for them. Not always, because there was a few very slick routines that they also ran. But yeah.
And I think she's also proving that her ability to go anywhere in the goal, but more so, she beats goalkeepers down to their own right-hand side with this lovely late rip, and consequently, therefore the defensive runners are having far less impact. Whereas if you look at a majority of the other ones that are defended well, they're defended well because the flickers are predominantly trying to go to the goalkeeper's left down that channel, trying to go through the runners or the truck and trailer, whatever you might call it. Whereas because they don't think they can score through the goalkeeper channel. And so consequently, Janssen is just undoing that with raw power, and probably 1 from 4 really is going in that channel that no one else can score in. And that therefore is pushing her percentages way, way higher than anybody else's.
Yeah, I think there definitely needs to be some studies done on quite how she's able to manipulate the ball that much that late. But yeah, so going into day 2, we had Railway Union, Slavia Prague. We had the 2 English men's teams with Old Georgians taking on Gantoise, Surbiton taking on Club Campo, and then back across into the women's. We had Gantoise, Club Campo, and then Den Bosch playing Watsonians. Railway Union, Slavia Prague, I thought would have been a little bit more one-sided. It coming away 3-2. I thought, like you mentioned, with Railway Union, they played very well in that first game, but just weren't taking their chances. And I thought Slavia Prague might have been a bit more exhausted chasing the game like they were against Gantoise. But I think they came out and gave a really good showing.
Yeah, and quite often in the ranking games, as we will talk about later on, that they are dreadful. The point for anyone who's listening, the ranking games are you are winning points for your country's teams in future. So the more points you get, then potentially as you move up the rankings, you could go from 1 team from a country to 2 teams to 3 teams. So that's the purpose of the ranking game. So there is a value in it. Although if the 2 teams in that game are from the same nation, then obviously there is no advantage to anybody winning or losing, which is why we got some of the games that we saw later on, or certainly one of them. I just thought I love it when 2 teams come out and go, you know what, we're here, let's give it a go. And it gives everybody an opportunity in those situations. If you feel a bit hard done by from the first day, you can come out and give it a crack. And they both did. And some of the standout players, I mean, Babicka for Slavia Prague is an outstanding player and captain, and did really well, and just proved that she is a leader even in a negative environment. And that sort of thing, it's those tiny little moments that give players the opportunity to put some wrongs right. So yeah, it was a good start today, a solid start to the day before we then bounced into the men's.
Yeah, and like you say, the heart of Slavia Prague, because they were 3-0 down and came back chasing late in the game.
Yeah.
Going across into the men's, we had Old Georgians versus Gantoise. Did that go the way you were expecting going into it?
In short, no. I thought it would be far, far closer. Unfortunately for Old Georgians, Antoine Keener decided to show up and show how good he is. And I'm one of his biggest critics. He is this elusive roller coaster emotion of a man. When he's good, he's unbelievable, and when he's not, he's just a liability. And he got player of the match. He was cool and calm. He broke lines when he needed to. He created opportunities, and it allowed Gantoise to play in the way they wanted to play. They want to sit back. They want to sit back and absorb pressure, and then they want to counter over distance. They want to win corners, and they did. And that his control element of the game meant that they gave away very few opportunities. If I think of someone like Sam Ward, who is seen as a world-class international scorer of goals and has scored hundreds on the world stage, I don't think until he got that one right at the end from a corner, I don't think he had a shot. And therefore, how well Gantoise defended and kept Old Georgians out of their circle, it was just kind of waves breaking on rocks. And it wasn't a game where OGs were unlucky. They genuinely, in my opinion, I think were outplayed.
No, I would agree. I think Gantoise were very well drilled, playing their low block defensive nature, absorbing pressure without giving away chances. Although I will say Hendricks could not buy his hat-trick in this game. Having a flick saved and then I believe extra time penalty corner, but definitely a corner against a team that had pulled their goalkeeper. And the lineman, fair play to him, had his brave pills in the morning and watched the drag flick straight onto his stick.
Picked it brilliantly. So yes, you're right. And then Surbiton Campo, I thought was a strange game, because Surbiton, you look at the team lists, you look at the players on those team lists who are capable of making a difference, and I genuinely thought Surbiton would win this one. I really did. I didn't think that Campo would have the strategic strength to hold Surbiton out. If you watch how well they've been playing in the league, they've got flow, they've got opportunity on set pieces. They're almost ticking every box. Were they an EHL winning team? In my opinion, no. I wouldn't have put anything on them at the beginning, but I did have them on my list through from the first round. And to then fall short in a way that it felt like when things didn't go well, they just tried to play quicker. And I don't think they necessarily didn't look like they changed very much. And then Revere in goal for Campo, obviously player of the match for that one, was one of the turning points of the game. And sometimes if your goalkeeper's doing that in a game and then you take your own chances, then fair play, you progress. And obviously they did. And kind of by the end of the game, deservedly so, because Surbiton really seemed to struggle to unlock them regularly.
No, I couldn't agree more. I think, as you mentioned, when things weren't working, Surbiton tried to play quicker, and I think that actually played into Campo's hands, because, I mean, I've said it before, the Spanish teams love to play run and gun. They like it to get raggedy. They like to go end-to-end sprints. And I think trying to play a Spanish team at that style of hockey just plays into their hands, and they came away winning.
Yeah, certainly did. Certainly did. And I think that, therefore, I don't think, looking back on it, it wasn't a surprise that result came out.
Yeah. Like you say, watching the game, there was only one clear winner. But going into it, I thought Surbiton would have had the quality to slow things down, control the game, and just manage the Spanish team out of it.
I agree, and it just felt like they didn't. It felt like they didn't zip the ball around, and somebody will probably now get in touch with all sorts of stats going, yeah, they did. They had loads of ball. And well, that's not what it looked like and felt like from the commentary box. And you kind of go, well, okay, if you've got a team who wants to play run and gun like the Spanish did, you manipulate the ball. You go corner to corner and you play through a high midfield and you pop some balls into the edge of the circle and see if you can kind of create errors. But what you don't do is try and force the play. You win by having huge amounts of ball, making very quick decisions, and playing 10-meter triangles. And it didn't feel like that they went to that. Which, if they had done with the quality of players they've got on their list, I think they could have done better.
Yeah, absolutely. Then into Gantois women versus Campo.
I'm going to sum this one up quite simply with Campo won in a shootout. Move on. Because the game itself. Well, and this is one of those things. So Gantois the previous day had looked so good, almost unplayable. And then we've all been in games and played games and watched other games when it just doesn't ever ignite. And it didn't. And it just felt like almost that Campo knew how good Gantois were if they gave them space to play. So they decided, well, we're not going to play because the minute we try and play, they'll expose us. And therefore, Gantois almost sat there, went, well, it'll open up in a minute. And then it never did. So they never forced play. And so it felt like this completely dead game. There was no emotion attached to it. It felt like nobody really went, right, I'm just going to run around a lot to make stuff happen and cause a bit of chaos. And so it almost doesn't deserve a match report. It went to a shootout and Campo won. Fair play.
Yeah, that is pretty much all I've got in my notes. Went to shootout. Not much else to really say. As I mentioned just before we started, I don't think there was a shot during normal time.
No, not that I remember.
So moving on, the hosts and defending champions at that point coming out and facing Watsonians in the final game of the day. A fairly easy run out for them. Matla banking 5.
Yeah, yes, and it's one of those games that from the first 3 minutes you knew which way the result was. Well, actually, before you even started, you knew which way the result would end up. But the nature of the result, there was a long clearance through ball to Matla, who got behind the last defender probably 3 minutes in, and she took it beautifully on her backhand. Such soft hands, rolled it into the circle and smashed it into the bottom corner. And at that point, you were like, oh, okay, this is going to be horrible. It wasn't horrible, but I think that's more to the fact that Den Bosch could play in third gear and create opportunities. Their movement was fantastic. But what I think's interesting is people sometimes criticize high-scoring games, and you go, well, is there any value to these lower-ranked teams coming in and learning what they face? And I genuinely think there is, because at one point there was an overhead ball that Rosa Fernig threw from left on the halfway line, roughly. And it went all the way over the top. And the Watsonians defender, I don't know who it was. It might have been Emily Dark. If it wasn't, then it's a bit harsh because she's an international player. But she'd positioned herself based on her understanding of a dynamic of a pass, of what could be done at that moment in time. So she'd front mark. She was 10 meters in front of her opponent who was on the baseline. And this ball goes over her head, a good 5 meters over her head. And all I can picture in her mind as she's watched it is the expletive-laden comment in her head going, oh, F, I've got this so badly wrong, because nobody throws a 50-meter cross field. Oh, they do now, because she potentially never played against Rosa Fernig, who could throw balls of that size. And so players then experience stuff that they've never seen. And essentially, I believe that then makes them a better player. So the exposure opportunity in those moments, I think, is fantastic. And Den Bosch have got such a roster of players against Watsonians. If you even tag them up 11 versus 11, the starting 11, Watsonians aren't winning a single one of those battles, unfortunately. And that's the hard truth of it. But that is just fact based on experience, international experience and club experience. But every one of those Watsonians players will come off going, oh, I now know what I could aspire to if that's my mindset. So I think it's hugely valuable from a tournament perspective, even though from minute 3 it was obvious what the outcome was going to be, and it could have been ugly, but wasn't, because they were comfortable, Den Bosch.
Yeah. But highlight for Watsonians, in their keeper did save a flick.
Yes. Yeah, very true.
Battler did get another flick about 2 minutes later that she did score, but one for the goalkeeper's highlight reel.
Yeah, very much. Very much. So, yeah, it was one of those games.
On to day 3, we had Reading facing Igara. We had Harvester and Mannheimer, Stixer and Braxgatter in the women, and we had Amsterdam Hamburger and Kampong Krefelde in the men's.
Yep. Yeah, Reading delighted in game 1. It was a ranking match, but delighted to get their first ever European victory. A game that could have kind of gone either way. Was one of those real sort of close games. Both teams gave it quite a lot. They were committed to it and wanted to finish on a high if they could. Reading learning and gaining experience, having never been in the tournament before. Igara not quite firing, struggled to really probably get themselves into the top 20% of performance. But so Reading edged it. It's again not going to go down as a classic, but a decent quality ranking game to start the day off before we moved into the final eights.
Yeah, I would agree. I thought a relatively close game. Again, Igara opening the scoring, Reading coming from behind, but it could have gone either way.
Yeah.
But an excellent opening game for the day. Then we had Harvest-Hutter versus Mannheimer. I thought this would be a lot closer than it was.
Yeah, me too.
I did think Mannheimer were going to take it, but I was thinking it was going to be a 1-goal margin and would be a close fought thing, maybe even going to a shootout.
Okay. Yeah, I agree. I think that my opinion was that Mannheim would win, but the nature of the win was so controlled. I mean, I know Mannheim were clear at Christmas at the top of their league and playing really, really well. They therefore carried a kind of a bit of form, but that form is still 2 or 3 months old from an outdoor perspective. So there's no guarantee that you're going to carry that on. But there seemed to be a real understanding across the side. They knew how they were going to play that game. They knew what they needed to do to unpick Harvester-Hutter. That knowledge of their opponent then helped, and they just found spaces. They played really well. Their ball handling, little triangles. Lucina Volder-Heider was amazing in how she manipulated space. Kurt chucking passes all over the place. They had a different dynamic, and Harvester-Hutter seemed to really struggle with that. And Mannheimer got on the front foot and were positive. It was a great performance.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like I say, I had thought it was going to be a real close affair, and similar to some of the other games, Mannheimer seemed to just control it so well. Maybe I wouldn't go as far as to say they played it in third gear, maybe getting into fourth, but I definitely think they had another kind of level that they could have taken it to had they really needed to.
Yeah, and isn't it interesting how you can win comfortably almost without having to sprint around the pitch if you know what you're trying to achieve, and you play to that, and you're given a plan, the plan is working, you just keep repeating that same plan, and consequently it felt like a comfortable win, as you say, without getting into third or fourth gear. It wasn't a high tempo game in any way, shape or form. It was just a very, very well structured performance with really high level basics, good passing from Mannheimer, and it just meant that Harvester-Hutter would living off scraps.
Yeah. And then Stixer, Braxgatter. Again, I think going into it, we all knew which way this game was going to go. But again, I thought it'd be a little bit closer.
Yep. I agree. I mean, you've only got to look at the team list from Braxgatter. They've got some really, really good quality players. I know they've lost a few, but they've got some really good quality players who potentially should have stepped up more, but they were almost made invisible by the nature again of how Stixer played. Stixer's top quality players and their second tier of players are then stepping up so well. I mean, you've got a youngster like Maud van der Heuvel who has came through the indoor. I first saw her at the indoor in 2025, and she was unreal. She'd come into that team as a youngster and was player of the tournament. I genuinely was almost unplayable and scored goals for the fun of it and controlled the whole pitch. And suddenly now she's one of their primary players. Obviously, you've got Janssen, but she's playing with Zandvoort, and that midfield kind of screenish combo now is much more than the world's best player and the world's best flicker. You've now got two of the world's best players, and one of them can flick. And that's now the difference, is she's now developed into this fabulous player herself. And there's so many then bit parts around it. And I'm looking at the team list down next to me. But then Yip and Pindika obviously shared goals in the next game, which they've done so well. But it wasn't all about the corners. There's this free-flowing, imaginative play through the midfield channels that then creates the front third opportunity. And it just felt like Brax weren't able to combat that at all. Their midfield control was pretty much zero, and Stichter could kind of do whatever they wanted, really.
Yeah. I don't know if this is something you mentioned in comms, because I was in the stadium and for some reason they won't let us listen in.
Okay.
The management of Yibi's pitch time. So quite a lot of the time she wasn't subbing off. She was moving from that kind of screen position into like a right back role, where she was being much more reserved. She wasn't chasing forward as much, just kind of managing her through the game to keep her on. And I don't know whether that was just so if they got a corner, she could keep her eye in. She could kind of use these earlier games as a bit of a warm up. Obviously, she got one late on in this game.
The answer to your question was, to be completely honest, was it wasn't a game I was working on. So when I knew we were talking, I skimmed through the games that I didn't actually talk about. Therefore, saw some lovely midfield control. Have no idea about that, the element you've just spoken about. If that's what's happening, then it's very clever. You want to keep a flicker on. I mean, you go back in the day, that's when you had a world-class flicker who wasn't a world-class player, you hid them in one of two or three different positions. Left half was one of those, left wing was another one, right half because it's a relatively straightforward distribution position. But if I think back to a Callum Giles at the beginning of his international career, now that is 30 odd years ago, and he's a good friend of mine, he would happily admit he wasn't the world's best player at that point, and therefore when he was then playing once rolling subs for corners was banned, he was left wing, sort of not the most obvious position on a pitch, because that's what you had to do. So Hella Bass, same thing, playing at left half, was not a great defender, and a good right wing would know that he could absolutely give him the runaround, but you had to put him into some sort of position. So he was on four corners, and if that's what they're doing with Janssen, when she's tired, that makes perfect sense, because that's no longer a performance decision, that's a fatigue decision.
No, the hiding of the flicker was usually, when I was growing up, left or right back, just for the outlet of the massive overhead.
Yeah.
There
you go.
I blame Callum Giles for making life difficult for flickers. Had to get the rule changed, didn't he? Yeah. I do like I remember talking to him once, and he was telling a story of subbing on a penalty corner with the opposition's goalkeeper that was coming on to face him. So they were making a change defensively to put on a goalkeeper specifically for him as he came on.
I was there. European Championships 1995 was the first time that happened. He was playing, and we played against England, played Switzerland, and Callum was subbed on 4 times. The goalie was subbed on 4 times. Callum scored 4 goals. They stopped doing it after that.
Good times. Right then. The next game was Amsterdam versus Hamburger, and like we sort of mentioned earlier, Amsterdam, I thought, looked unplayable at times during this game.
They did, and what was interesting, though, talking to a few Dutch people in the lead up to it, everybody was talking about how exciting Amsterdam were going forwards, but they were also talking, and a good friend of mine, Simon Organ, was on WhatsApp all the way through the game talking about it, going, Amsterdam are amazing, but their defence is shaky. And therefore that's proven. Ollie Payne for Amsterdam got man of the match. Yeah. You've got both the Kassim brothers playing, you've got a variety of other players, incredible, and yet it's the goalkeeper that's man of the match. So I know they won 4-1 as they did, and they were amazing going forwards, but they could easily have lost that 5-4, 6-4 on a different day, because it was Payne got in the way of everything. But one point made 2 point blank fabulous reflex saves, and it gave them that defensive platform they could then play attacking hockey through, and they scored some great goals, and they looked if you assume that Payne would take that form forwards and they could defend as well as they were defending, they look like potential champions in that game, because how well they attacked was high quality EuroHockey League, relatively high risk, but expansive, exciting, creative hockey. That was the sort of thing that everybody kind of wants to see in games like that.
Yeah, the Kasim's attacking flair is something to behold, and it's well worth a watch.
Yep.
Like you say, I think the confidence that having Ollie Payne behind you must give, because let's be fair, they've not got the strongest defense at Amsterdam at the minute. It's I'm blanking out, Kemperman, who's playing at centre back, who's moved from an attacking position slowly backwards and has ended up as kind of one of their centre backs. So
yeah, one of the best attacking left midfielders in the world for a number of years.
Yeah,
and then finds himself a sweeper or wherever he's playing. Yep, agreed.
But I think, just having Payne behind must inspire so much confidence in them that gives them that freedom going forwards. And like you say, man of the match in this game, he did pull off some incredible saves.
Yeah. And it took him a little while at the start of the season, by his own admission, when you talked to him, to fit into a team that the defensive structure wasn't great. He's used to being quite a solid, conservative, stand back, take the shots type goalkeeper, rather than policing around his circle. And in the beginning, when you were watching, there was this gap between the defenders and the goalkeeper that was being exploited by teams. They've got that balance back now, and the defenders are in a better position. He can then play to his strengths that little bit more and be more effective as he was in that game. But it's taken a while, which is then interesting as we kind of segue into Kampong with their goalkeeper, who's had a dreadful season by his own standards, and yet then came into this tournament. It was almost like he went, this is world level, I'm going to be world level. And it was really interesting to watch for Calzado.
Yeah, I mean, we can go on to that now with the Kampong Krefeld game. 4-4 going into shootouts. I've been quoted before of saying never bet against a German team in a shootout.
Okay.
Kampong decided they wanted to prove me wrong. Fair play to them. They were excellent.
Yeah, they were. I mean, the game itself was interesting, because obviously it's 2-0 Krefeld, 4-2 Kampong, 4-4 after Krefeld set the goalkeeper off. I think it's the goalkeeper off with, I think it was something like 9 minutes to go, scored 2, brought the goalkeeper back on, and then it didn't peter out, but then the last 3 or 4 minutes were level pegging. And then Kampong played their other goalkeeper in the shootout. Their second goalkeeper played and was brilliant, made several quality saves. During the course of the game, Calzado, though, showed how good he is as an international goalkeeper. And it was just a fantastic open play game where there were so many different little not caveat points, little microcosm, high points and low points of individuals. It's a beautiful roller coaster seesaw of a game that again shows when two teams come out, and it was unstructured at times, and there was some fantastically exciting passages of play, some great midfield running, length of pass, overheads, all the sort of things that you want to see. Was just brilliant, really, really good. And Duco doing what Duco does.
Yeah, he is a big match player.
Yeah, absolutely loves it.
But yeah, I think this is possibly a match I would put forward as a candidate for why the EHL is so good. Just
yep, I'd agree with that. And interesting, we'll come back to it later on, but also one of the latter men's games, the Hamburger Krefeld game, where they came out in a ranking match and went, okay, let's just go toe to toe.
Yeah,
I mean, compare that to the other, the all English affair compared to the all German affair. You got a shocking game on one hand, and then a fabulous 5-4 advert on the other one. So yeah, it was definitely up there. And we always get 3 or 4 every year that are so good that they're a delight to watch.
Yeah. Okay, we can roll forward. The next day we had Surbiton taking on Old Georgians first. Then we had Gantoise Watsonians, followed by Club Campo versus Den Bosch, and finally Mannheimer versus Stixer. Do you want to give a brief review of the Georgians Surbiton game?
I'll be blunt. I'm not going to make any friends. It goes into the worst 5 EHL games I've ever talked about. If ever two teams really didn't want to be there, That was it. And as I said right at the beginning, the ranking games have purpose, and I get it. However, when you're in a game like that and the points don't make any difference, and you've got end of league season, massive international year, there's all sorts of reasons why a game like that is going to be a poor game, and unfortunately it was. So I can defend why it was poor. It doesn't make it any less of an awful game to commentate on, but it was what it was. I'm not going to criticize the players within it. There's a reason why sometimes these games do end up that way, and that was just one of them. Let's put it in the drawer of games we don't need to revisit. It's not going to make many highlight reels.
No, that's it. Someone asked me what they missed in that game. I said there was a penalty corner, there was a flick, and 68 other minutes of hockey took place.
Yes, correct. I think that's a very good summary. And how do we move
on? So following that, we had Gantois Watsonians.
Yep. And that's one of those teams when, again, if you look at the two team lists and put them side by side and say, look, if everybody plays to 80% of their ability, then Gantois are going to win. Their team list is too deep. Watsonians, by this point, some of their players were getting tired. You could see that there was some heavy legs, and the skill set of Van den Bodde or whomever of that kind of quality, then suddenly you're like, you know what? I'm picking passes. I'm playing down channels. Was this the game where there was 3 penalty strokes and Van den Bodde missed both? There was a game when there were 4 penalty strokes for Gantois, and 3 of them were missed. So Steph Van den Bodde missed 2. Ballingham missed 1 and scored 1. It might not have been this game, but it doesn't really matter. But there was several strokes, and yeah, this was just one of those games. Again, it's a ranking match where teams are a little bit mismatched, and Gantois just played to their strengths. And Watsonians, getting tired, did as much as they possibly could, and the consolation goal at the end, they celebrated like they won the World Cup. And to be fair, that was probably kind of one of the highlights of their weekend.
No, yeah, I think you've summed it up quite well. Just the difference in class, the way that Gantois were able to play, again, just gives questions about the previous match's performance, where they just never seemed to fire up when they had this sort of performance in the locker.
Which is really strange, because it's not like they're a group of young, excited individuals who've never been at this level before. They've got some of the world's best players, genuinely exciting people that you would put onto any sort of team list. If you're trying to pick a European select 11, for example, there's players in there that you would absolutely put on that list. And yet, for whatever reason, in the prior game, they must look back at the video of it and just kick themselves and go, well, why do we just do better? That horrible coaching phrase of just be better, and they weren't. So yeah, I mean, that's how it finished off. It was controlled and it was easy for them, and therefore, again, they got through that win, albeit with a little bit more effort, because it did show on their faces at the end of the game. But it was another one of those ones: tick the box, go home, learn.
Yeah. And then we had Club Campo taking on Den Bosch in the first of the semi-finals. I think probably no one told Kampong that it was supposed to be a run out for Den Bosch. Despite the scoreline, I thought they really battled quite hard throughout. There was obviously a difference in class, but just the way that they came out and chased the game and really went for it, I thought was great.
Yeah, we've both watched a lot of hockey, and that's what you want, really. If you're in that situation, you've got to go, right, what's the disruption? How can I disrupt this? How can I get stuck in, get involved, be on the front foot, ask questions of the opponents? And that's what they did. You don't want to be finishing a game like that thinking, well, what if we'd done something different? And therefore I fully admire how they came out. They've obviously got some fantastic players anyway, the Club de Campo side, and those players, they played okay. Sarah Barrios, I like. She's again growing in maturity. She does pretty well. Then obviously Maria Lopez is such a great player as the captain to kind of control things, and they try and base things around her that little bit. but it was just not quite enough. That's the problem, is you've got all of the thunder and the emotion and the bluster, but then the underlying skill set just is fractionally below, 10 or 20% below that of your opponents. And again, therefore, Den Bosch could unpick the lines and they could find the elimination space. They could then get through, and they then had more passing opportunities in the front third than their opponents did, which then just creates the opportunities. And then Matla can step up and smash a hat-trick, and with the other players around her supporting that. So it was a great game to watch. I didn't feel the result was ever really in question, but it was obviously late goals that opened it up. So for a while it stayed pretty level.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was the end of the third quarter where Campo got the equaliser midway through, and Den Bosch had to sort of fire back up, having been not coasting, but not throwing themselves at it, knowing that they had, if they got through, a pretty tough game coming up. And I think they got 2 within the space of 2 minutes or something like that in the closing section, of 2 field goals as well. So not even like extra time penalty corners. And then turned it on again towards the end of the final quarter to wrap the game up.
Yeah, the goal times. So just come looking at my match report. Yes, the guys. Yeah, so Den Bosch went up in the 22nd, and then Mayas for Campos equalised in the 41st. So that was when it kind of went, oh, okay, now we've got a game on this. Suddenly Den Bosch scored 45, 45, 48, 49. Job done. Thank you very much. Go home. And it was literally like one of those moments where they went, oh, we're going to have to play for a bit now. And they did for 8 minutes, wrapped it up. And once it got to that point, there was no way Campo were coming back. But they were made to work hard. They were, and Matt picked up a green card in that, and Nick Brow picked up a yellow card in that game. So it shows that they are working to try and maintain that result. So it wasn't an easy thing for them, but yeah, just a little bit more powerful in the end.
That's it. And I think the 2 field goals were fairly similar to each other. Win the ball high, drive baseline, fire into the area in front of goal, and there will be someone there who will put the ball away.
Yeah. Exactly that.
And then the other semi-final, Mannheimer Stixer.
That's very much a repeat of a couple of other things about it. It's almost a repeat of Mannheimer Harvesterhude in the round before, but against Mannheimer in this instance, it was exactly the same. It's almost like you got 3 tiered teams, and you got Harvesterhude who are tier 1. You've then got playing Mannheimer who are tier 2, and Mannheimer have all the control, and there's never a question. And then you've got Mannheimer who go into that game and play against a team who are tier 3, and then they don't have a response. That again felt like a really, to some degree, easy game for Stixer. They had time on the ball. They were able to pick passes. They made sensible decisions. And Mannheimer, you just felt, didn't ever really get into it. And that was disappointing for them, given the quality of the side they've got. But after a really, really strong first quarter, it was all in Stixer's favour. I mean, they got those 3 goals in the first quarter. I was commentating with Minka Boyd for that game, and she's like, "This is the one thing that Stixer will be criticised for, is they haven't put their foot on the throat of their opponent. They've scored 3 and then they've backed off, and the game then petered out into nothing because Stixer at 80% were able to go, well, we're not going to lose. We're not going to concede 3 goals. So if you go back to managing Yibi Janssen's time, they essentially managed their entire team time. There was nobody who came off looking fatigued. It looked really comfortable, and Mannheimer just had no answers. They weren't able to find any passing lanes, and they would have come off that game, oh, that's just, it really fit. We've been beaten, and we were never really in it. There wasn't even a flare moment where you thought, oh, they're going to get a goal and they'll come back. It never had that feeling. It always felt that Stixer, if they needed to, could have put the foot down and taken the game further away. They just didn't need to.
No. 3 superb deflected goals in the first quarter. I'm sure as a card-carrying member of the Goalkeepers Union, you hated those. But
yep.
Just the pinpoint accuracy of the passing for the first 2, and the touch on the penalty corner was superb.
Yeah. And you've got to be there to score them. Obviously, the forwards who are getting there to make those deflections and to run the routines, but the quality of the pass also has to be there. I mean, the first deflection off that angle ball in on the backhand, I know it comes off a defender. So it's been deflected onto a defender's foot and it goes in the roof, which makes it look a whole lot better. But you've still got to be there. And Mannheim's defensive lines were all wrong. They just, for that first quarter, it was like, okay, it'll be all right now, but it's too late. It's gone. It's done. And then, as you say, the deflected corner, rather than flicking the first one, Janssen just puts it on an absolute plate and it gets deflected. It might have gone in off the top part of the post, whatever it was. It went right in the top corner. It's just unstoppable. You can't stop those unless you run a particular defensive pattern, which they weren't running.
That's it. And just, as you say, then just managing the game.
Yeah.
Looking after players' minutes, making sure no one's overly fatigued, knowing that they've got Den Bosch in the final. Then we are on to the fifth, which was Harvestehude Braxgata for the first game. My list has got all jumbled up, which is great. Campo Gantoise men's, then Amsterdam Kampong, and Hamburger Krefelder.
Good day of hockey. It's the first statement. Harvestehude Braxgata, it was fine. They both came out to try and play. It wasn't the greatest technical game. Quite a lot of ball retention, turnover, ball retention issues, and then eventually, obviously, went to a shootout. And it was good for the neutral. There was lots of action. The goals were pretty well spread out across the course of the game. In the end, Harvestehude's shootouts weren't great. The last three, they missed the last three. Braxgata was better. And therefore, in short, that's why they got the result they got. But the games themselves, the game itself was fine. It just wasn't. It wasn't a game that was ever going to light anything up. It was two teams who were finishing off their EHL tournament as best they could, whilst carrying a little bit of fatigue forwards and probably protecting themselves a bit for the remainder of their seasons.
Yeah, I think that's a fair summary of it. I'll be honest, I was in the stadium and I probably couldn't have told you that much about it straight after. It was a good game of hockey, but not a memorable game of hockey.
Yeah, that's a very fair analysis. Full credit to the players; they're high quality players, but it was never a game that was going to stick in your mind. Certainly, once the next three games have been played out, because it was a 4-game day and the next three were great. So it was always you've got a certain amount of game stuff you can retain in your head, and that first game was never going to then outshine the latter three.
No. So then we had the first of the men's semi-finals, which was Campo versus Gantoise. And again, I don't think anyone told Campo how this was supposed to go.
Nope.
They absolutely went for it, and it's why I like watching the Spanish teams do well, because again, quoted description of them is the terriers of the EHL. They have no sense of scale. They're going to go and fight whatever's put in front of them. Doesn't matter if it's a massive Alsatian, they will go for it. And they really took it to Gantoise and had them on the back foot for a lot of the game.
Yep. Really did. And it was really interesting. I think I commented at the end of the third quarter how Antoine Keener just looked like he didn't want to be there. His shoulders were down. They were really struggling. They weren't really firing. And then all of a sudden, at the start of that fourth quarter, it really picked up, and Gantoise had a load of corners at the end of the third, and they just felt like they got a bit more emotion into their play. And then the minute that happened, they became the side that we know they are. They're so good. And unfortunately, I mean, Club de Campo will probably look back on that. They're gonna put some of the blame on the umpires. They're gonna feel that they got the butt end of some decisions. They picked up a flurry of cards, 2 greens, 2 yellows, and I think that tired them out a bit. So in the latter stages of quarter 4, they then struggled, which is when Gantoise then stepped up and picked up the goals that they did. But you're right, it was a great game. Club de Campo just went at it hard, and I think that's brave when you know that Gantoise are going to sit back. They want to sit back deep in that low block. They want to counter attack. They want to win some corners. And it was exciting, and it was one of those games that you finish going, I was glad I was part of that game because it had a real emotion about it. And so, yeah, I genuinely enjoyed the game as a spectacle because it was open. It was a bit chaotic at times. It had a real buzz about it, roller coaster wise, one team being up and in control, another team falling away, not having any answers. And then suddenly it springs to life. And the last 10 minutes are fantastic.
Yeah. Like I say, without the cards, I could have maybe seen Campo getting the upset, but I think, as you mentioned, just the flurry of cards that they got, I think they pretty much all came in the third quarter.
Yep.
And just the extra running that the other players had to do to kind of cover for those, because I think they spent the majority of the third quarter down a player.
Yeah, nine of the 15 minutes. So it's 2 greens and a yellow they picked up. I think the green and yellow overlapped. I haven't got that, but I've got, it's quarter 3 that was an issue for them.
But then that final quarter, just the tiredness, allowing Gantoise back in. I think Hendricks possibly missed another penalty in this game.
Yep.
But then finding a goal from a corner and kind of sparking that kind of comeback fire within his team again to go and chase the game, and seeing them through. And then the second semi-final, Amsterdam Kampong, again, great game.
Just incredible. And again, finished with a flurry, quarter of amazing. So Amsterdam scoring first, obviously, and took that 1-0 lead. Not unexpectedly, but an unexpected player to get that. Steins Bishop stepping up and getting the first. And then, but it was amazing how Kampong, in the face of a really poor league season, there's uncertainty about the coach for next year. A number of their players are allegedly going off to play for other people. So it had all of the prospects of a team that could be fragmented and would just fall apart. And then all of a sudden they seem to find this depth of belief. Sander Devine was part of that because as a senior pro, he stepped up. I think he got player of the match in this game. And he just bossed it. He just went, we're not going to lie down here. We're just going to go toe to toe. We know that Amsterdam are vulnerable at the back if we go hard at them. So they did. And it was a classic EHL open, high tempo affair. Loved it. And the finish, the finale of everybody getting tired and just going as hard as they possibly could. Big yellow card for Amsterdam with three minutes to go or so. Kemperman picking that up, which opened things up. It meant that Kampong hammered them. And they had a block of penalty corners towards the end. And even then, though, there was chances at the other end. So easily it could have gone. It had 3-3 in a shootout written all over it. From an EHL historic perspective, that's what happens in games like that. But great, fair play to Kampong, and it saw them through, which was just incredible. Again, given how people were talking about them coming into the competition.
Yeah, and I mean the amount of attacks that Kampong absorbed when they were 2-1 up to maintain that lead for so long. And then as soon as Amsterdam kind of hit them with the equaliser, breaking down the other end and winning a penalty corner almost immediately, which they then converted, and then, like you say, the card, and just piling on the pressure, stretching the game again, making it just fantastic for a neutral fan to go and watch.
Yeah, I think the third quarter defence from Kampong, when they didn't give them anything, they gave Amsterdam nothing, no corners, no goals, nothing in that quarter. The discipline they showed was remarkable, because that's when, having a bad season, things just crack. If things aren't quite going in your favour, just little cracks appear, and that's where you end up. But fair play to them, loved it, great game.
Yeah, and then the final game of the day was Hamburger and Crefeld. Again, Memo's not reaching them. It's a ranking game with 2 teams from the same country. You're getting the points. Result doesn't matter. Relax, take it easy. No. Absolutely went for it. I think they traded back the lead 3 times.
Yes, potentially. So what have I got here? So so it was 1-0 Hamburg, 1-1, 2-1 Hamburg, 2-2, 3-2 Krefeld, 3-3, 4-3 Hamburg, 5-3 Hamburg, 5-4 Krefeld was the pattern of the goals, and Krefeld threw the kitchen sink at Hamburg for the last 10 minutes. It was absolutely brilliant. And I think what was interesting for this was that in a game, certainly from a Hamburger Polo Club perspective, where there are so many well-known international names, it was more, I'm going to say it was more the domestic players who made the standout plays. And you look at someone like, for example, Tim Brand, just he didn't have the sort of weekend you would expect him to have. Tom Craig going forwards got completely outdone by some amazing defence from David Hoosman of Amsterdam. They were put toe to toe in the first game, and he completely negated it. And Craig, yes, he scored a goal in this game, but when my recollection of his actions are two incredible sliding tackles, that shows that he's not quite gunning at the other end of the pitch. But it was this fabulous advertisement for when high quality players just go, we're just going to play hockey as best we can. And there were some amazing goals, and there was a passing length, and there were corners. Just it had everything. It genuinely had everything. And was it worthy of a final? No, because it wasn't quite that high. Was it worthy of being one of those games that you put in that top drawer that you remember? Yes, 100%. It was a great finish to a superb day, and it could easily have petered out because this game was after the semi-finals.
Yeah,
everybody had left, other than a few people who've been drinking beer all day in the Easter sunshine. It could have been a nothing game where nobody gave a monkeys, but all of a sudden they did, and it was brilliant.
Yeah. Like you say, just some absolutely standout performances. I think Kane Russell, I think got 2 in this game.
Yeah,
was fantastic at running play from the back, creating chances for teammates. And like you say, when you think of Tom Craig, you don't usually go, made some fantastic tackles in this game.
Yeah.
But yeah, absolutely superb. And then I think that takes us on to the final day.
Yes, it does.
Which opens with the women's bronze medal match, which was Campo Mannheimer. Then the men's, which saw Campo taking on Amsterdam. Then the women's final match, which was Den Bosch versus Stixer, and the men's final, which was Gantoise Kampong. So the women's bronze medal match, I think, was probably how I'd expected the result to go, but maybe not the performance.
No, it's a strange game. I wasn't working on this when I was watching, and it just felt a bit muted. It didn't ever really come to life. I thought it would with the early Campo goal, and I thought, oh, Mannheim are going to have to do something now, and it then didn't. Campo had a real flurry of corners at the end of the first quarter, and I think if they'd got a second goal, I think Mannheim might have panicked a little bit and then really put their foot down. As it was still quite controlled. They got 2 back in the second quarter to go 2-1 up. They were 2-1 up at half time, and that's when almost the third quarter was dreadful. It just seemed to drag forever. It was like Mannheim were happy and comfortable, and Campo really didn't find the spark that they needed. And then the final quarter, the fact that Campo equalised right at the beginning of the final quarter set that final quarter up wonderfully, and then it became a little bit more chaotic, and it was end to end, and there was a flurry of corners for Campo, there was a stroke for Mannheimer, and it was a really strong finish. But it was a game that you feel, if you were describing it, if you were writing it, you go, it kind of lost its way. It lost its way. It was a slow burn in the first half, never really set alight. Mannheim in control, showed the strength they had. Campo kind of broke on the rocks of that Mannheim defence, and then the third quarter was like, oh, this is going nowhere. This is going to finish at 2-1, and then we had this beautiful burst of excitement at the end, which was worthy of the finish. Mannheim deserved the medal in terms of general balance of play. Although if you're a Campo fan, they'll probably go, no, we had loads of chances in the last quarter, should have done better. But over the course of 60 minutes, I think it was Mannheim's game.
Yeah. Like I say, going into it, I would have said Mannheimer would take the win. I thought, especially getting the early goal, like you mentioned, I thought Campo would really go after them early and really pursue a second with much more intent after that first quarter, because I thought they were quite dominant for the full first quarter, and then they came out for the second, and Mannheimer just slowed the game right down. Campo never really picked that tempo back up, and like you say, when Mannheimer went 2-1 at half time and it just slowed the game so much, and Campo just weren't firing that third quarter, I agree with you. I thought, well, it's going to be 2-1. They're just going to manage this game out. Maybe they'll get a third from like a penalty corner or something later on in the game. But the Campo goal, was it within the first minute or first 2 minutes of the start of the final quarter, really made them kind of run through the gears as quick as they could. And as they were sort of spinning back up, Campo were trying to hit them on the counter. And it made a good final quarter to watch. If we can just cut out that middle third, maybe this will make the edit for great games. But
yeah, died a bit of it, but there was enough in it. You look at it and go, was there enough in it for a highlight reel? And the answer was yes. There was enough moments in the game that you kind of go to the end of it and go, you know what, there's bits in there that I'll remember, which is really positive. But yeah,
the men's bronze medal match, Campo Amsterdam. Again, good competitive game. Campo taking the lead early. Amsterdam coming back and taking the lead. Campo piling on the pressure and getting the late equaliser, taking us into a shootout.
This had the feel of I'm not going to say a proper EHL game, but over the years, what we've seen is some real swinging momentum where there's consistent pressure across the entire game. It got a little bit explosive, some moments of tension, and then I don't genuinely know how we stayed on the pitch all the time. I think that's full credit more to Campo than it is to Amsterdam, as they got more fiery. It would easily been easy in that last quarter to see a flurry of cards. I think it was really well umpired, but it was brilliant in terms of the tempo of the game. It didn't die. It was consistently high. There was corners all the way through for both, so there's circle entries and opportunities. It wasn't one of those games that sits between the 23s. There's quite a lot of action at either end, and you've obviously got the highlight players from either side who are making stuff happen, and consequently across either of those teams, it then gives you those moments that you can then go, oh, there was that, and there was that finish, and there was that goal, and that save again. Revere was really good in goal. I'm trying to think, that was a game Ollie Payne might let a goal in. It's disappointing. I think it was a backhand, possibly in that game, they'll be disappointed with. But you've then got you can't ignore how exciting it is when Diane Kassim up front has the ball. Every time he gets the ball, you just think something's going to happen. And for Campo, that didn't quite exist. It still frustrates me that we don't see Enrique Gonzalez doing more. He's at the start of his international career, he's one of my standout players, and yet he just kind of drifts through games. You go, where's this thing? Where's the magic that you used to have? And then Villalonga is building into that. But in the front line, obviously, you've then got the skipper Iglesias, who is actually a lot younger than you think. I think he's been around. I think he's about 50. He's been around as long as I have, but he hasn't. He's only 32, I think. So still relatively young, and still leads that team with a real strength of character, which I enjoy watching. So it had lots of different moments within the game, and was another fantastic advert for EHL.
Yeah, and just to shout out Lee Morton for the final shootout.
Yeah.
He was the only calm person in the stadium. Looked like he was just taking one at training. So calm. Everyone else is sat on the edge of their seat watching this shootout, going and doing that. Just fantastic. And especially after he gave away the penalty corner the day before that cost them the game.
Yep.
What a turnaround.
Brilliant moment. Beautiful. Lovely little dink between the feet. You got to love a cheeky shootout finish. None of this, they're all coming into this big bumpy goalkeeper and spin around the feet. And I get it. It's successful, but I far, far prefer cheeky little movements. Stay facing the goalkeeper. a bit like, whilst it was a shootout, a bit like Crofty in the shootout. I love the fact that Crofty for old Georgians just walked into the top of the circle and smashes it in the corner. And go on, stop that. And it's just brilliant. At some point, someone will stop one. He might do something different, but you do want. Well, no, that's not true, because sport is about winning its numbers on that scoreboard, and therefore scoring in the most sensible manner is fine. But as a neutral in the commentary box, you always want a little bit of a bit of flair, and that's what we got.
Yeah.
So Campo disappointed, therefore that both teams, men's and women's, go home in fourth.
Yeah. But no, on the shoot, I agree. I've had many a discussion with Keeley at FH umpires of, I think the turning you back to the goalkeeper on a shootout should be banned just because it's boring.
If we're going to talk about that, then you also shouldn't be able to do a video referral if you're 3 goals up inside the last minute. You're not allowed to refer that. Stop it. Pack it in. Go away. It makes absolutely no difference. Just drags the game out. I can't go and get a cup of coffee. If it doesn't make any difference to goal difference, get away with it.
Or you double down and say if it's not successful, it's a flick to the opposition.
Oh, but any of those phrases, we can go through EHL, the fun rules that I think should be. If we're going to do fun rules, then I think a green card should be a lap of the pitch. It's not a time. You've just got to go off at the halfway line, run a lap of the pitch. So how tired you are when you come, but you have to come back on. You can't be substituted. You have to come back onto the pitch. We were discussing this at Masters level and wondered if therefore essentially it's a 4-minute penalty if you get above the how fast you run and try and come back on again. But anyway, yeah, that's an aside. Yeah. Moving on.
The women's final, Den Bosch sticks. We've already talked about it a little bit. Obviously, the telltale moment is the Janssen penalty corner, which ended up deciding it. But a real battle of 2 oppositions who know what each other are trying to do and have played each other numerous times and have strategies set up of how they're going to manage the game.
Yeah, and they're not gonna play to what we want them to do. I mean, why should they? They're not going to play to the neutral or the person who wants to see some of the very best hockey players in the world, and there's probably a dozen of them across those 2 team lists. But they want to win the EHL. That's the purpose, and therefore Den Bosch knew the result from the league a few weeks ago was 4-0 in Styx's favour. They knew how that game had gone. They understood that they'd been a little bit too open. They'd allowed Styx to get through their lines. So they went, okay, we're just going to stand here and let you run out of ideas, and then we're going to counterattack. We've got good enough players through those forward linkages that they've shown that they're going to get those 3 or 4 passes in a row that's going to get them in the opposition circle, that's going to get them a corner or a goal shot, and they'll win it that way. But it didn't happen because Styxer then didn't overcommit, so they then didn't try and win it by smashing Den Bosch. They were controlled, they were patient, and it meant that a majority of the game was played between the 2 23s. And unfortunately, from a neutral perspective, that meant it wasn't the most exciting women's final we've ever had. If you look at the quality of skills, though, if you break that down into a technical kind of coaching perspective, it was actually a really high quality game in terms of how fast the ball zipped around, how good the defensive lines were, how clean the tackling was, the range of passes, all of those things. But with both teams playing within themselves, it never set alight, but it couldn't because of the structures. So I think there'll be coaches who will look at that going, that was a great game. For the rest of us who just wanted to finish 6 days on as high as possible, we go, oh, that's a shame. But fair play, and also then to Yivi Janssen, who stepped up and give her one, I think she had 2 chances in the game, but 1 from 2, yeah. Bang, bag it up, unstoppable. Fair play. She's the best flicker in the world.
Yeah. I was going to say, it's not a great game for the neutral, but it's a fantastic game for the analysts who want to go and highlight, this is how you play a defensive structure, this is how you play against it, this is how you move the ball around, this is how you try and create chances. Going back and watching the video and taking coaching points from it will be amazing. But when you want to see 2 of the best women's teams go out and trade punches rather than trying to manage the performance, counter the opposition, and not chase the game.
Exactly that, and that was the outcome that we got, unfortunately. So yeah, not a great game for the neutral, but a good game from good words from an analytical perspective. Absolutely.
And then moving on to the men's final, Gantoise Kampong. I'll be honest, I thought at halftime Kampong were going to coast through the rest of the game, because I don't think Gantoise really fired up until probably, if not the final quarter, late in the third.
I agree, and this actually, remembering back, this is the game that I relate to Kinar with his shoulders slumped at the end of the third quarter. They'd had a flurry of corners. Kampong had defended them all, and it was almost like, we got nothing. We're done. We nothing's working for us. There was a frustration. There was a little bit of emotion directed at the umpires at this point, and it was really interesting. Kampong were comfortable. They were really comfortable, and then they ran out of legs. And then they just got tired, and it was like, oh, Gantoise, who haven't really expended a huge amount of energy, it just felt like they got a bit of a spring in their step. Those 2 cards at the start of the fourth quarter for Kampong genuinely changed the dynamic of the game. At that point, I do not understand, and I will bang this drum until I'm not allowed to bang it anymore. Gantoise took their goalie off at the end to try and win the game. Why would you not take your goalie off when you have 2 opponent players sitting down with a green and a yellow for a 2-minute overlap, and you at that point you're 3 goals down? It makes no sense. They didn't do it until those corners had elapsed, and then they took the goalie off to play an extra man. I mean, talk about, I genuinely think if they'd taken their goalie off the minute those 2 cards overlapped, they'd have won that game, or certainly gone to shootout, because Kampong was scrambling. They were hanging on by the end of it. And fair play, they hung on, but Gantoise had all of the energy. Suddenly, Kino was getting higher. Suddenly, Hendricks was getting higher. They scored the goal. So Hendricks got a corner, and then Mattis Lauer's first ever EHL goal to get you back within touching distance was just incredible. But I mean, Gantoise 9 penalty corners. Kampong 1. I just genuinely, I mean, what a result for Kampong. And I loved it at the end. It had a proper grandstand finish feel to it. Pulling the goalkeeper, couple of late goals, all of the possession was at one end. You've then got Sander Devine on a big long run up to the other end with the ball into the bottom corner, and you're like, well, just stay there, and then losing it, and this massive shuttle coming back again the other way. You've then got Hertzberger, because he knew that Sander Devine, so Hertzberger was on the post-match interviews. You've got Hertzberger messaging me going, Sander Devine's got to be man of the match. I was like, he was man of the match yesterday. You can't have it twice. It's going to somebody else. Everybody had a reason for being involved in the game, and it was brilliant. It was all those moments that built it into that crescendo.
Yeah, I mean, the final quarter was electric, especially from, like you say, I don't get why they didn't pull the goalkeeper. It baffled me. I was like, they're 3 goals down. If they're going to go for it, now's surely the moment that you commit. But from Hendricks getting the goal to the final whistle, I don't think any of the Gantoise players stopped sprinting.
No, and it's interesting. You go, well, why? Where was that energy early on? Why could you not create that? And that's part of the beauty of top level sport, is that it's not predictable. And for some reason, stuff doesn't happen for 90% of the game, and then suddenly it does. And that's why we watch as much as we do, and we enjoy as much as we do.
Yeah. But like you say, nine penalty corners defended, and then the one that goes in suddenly sparks them into life, and they feel that they can get back into the game. And it's a couple of minutes later they get the second, and then, like I say, push right to the final whistle. And there was some real end-to-end play. It could have quite easily swung the other way as they committed forwards.
Easily, and as they gave it, and it was one of those ones where you could just see there was a chance for Duco Telgenkamp at some point. I can't remember when in the game it was, but Gantoise has stepped really high, and then a through ball came all the way through, and I think it was well saved in the end. Yes, it was. Jamie Carr forced him wide. Duco couldn't finish, but it was this brilliant thing of everybody stepped up really high, and then suddenly there's one chance at the other end. He just runs away and essentially roofs it. Didn't, but yeah, that kind of thing.
So just a few few things. So we talked about penalty corner conversion rates. The leading goal scorer for the men's was Hendricks, who I think finished on 4.
Okay.
And for the women's was Janssen finishing on 6 ahead of Matler. Matler just ahead of Janssen in the women's. But
Yeah,
I think really low scoring tournament from penalty corners in the men's, especially.
But that plays into men's international hockey at the moment anyway. We're down to 20% conversion rates, and it's because the corner runners are now so strong, are now so good, now so brave. The lines are so tight that the number of corners that we get 2 and 3 in a row, that then the flicker is then trying to really work incredibly hard to find the tiny ball width gap that there might be, and therefore the error rate missing the right hand post as you look from a striker is creeping up as people are trying to go round that double block runner, and because of that, goalkeepers are making more saves in that right hand channel. I do think there will come a time when people now start to manipulate it. We're seeing a bit of it with goalkeepers offsetting on the other side and runners doing something different to try and wrestle a bit of power back. However, in the men's game particularly, and we've seen it all the way back through to Paris Olympics, the percentages are now down to 20%, whereas back in my day you were aiming for 33, you had 1 out of 3 basically. We're now down to 1 from 5, and with the way things are going, I don't see that changing.
Yeah. So a couple of standout flickers. We've obviously mentioned Janssen, but Kane Russell was 3 from 6.
Yep.
And I do think Kane Russell is fantastic. I mentioned him earlier on.
His pace, his pure ball speed, is incredible. When he rips it and gets it away, it's incredible. I think what will be interesting is now, as if you see Kasim flicking, he does now, and he's not one of the best at the moment. The move that he does that I think we're going to see come into the men's a bit more is the drag into your feet to just open up and then a slingshot out to the bottom left. I think we might see Roper does it for England, Great Britain, but off a slip rather than off a straight flick. And I think we're going to possibly see just a little bit more of that ability to move the ball to an inside line to then throw it back on an outside line just to miss the runners. I think we're going to see a bit more variety there.
Yeah, I do think that's going to come into play as they mess around with, like you say, goalkeeper position, how they're going to run lines, just to counter the attacking threats at the top of the D and possibly force more routines.
Yeah, exactly. I think we're going to see a bit more of
that. One thing in the stats that I've been sent over by it to Tommy, Belhain scored all 5 of her goals in one match.
Mm-hmm.
Stixer have gone the long way around winning, having played it in every round of the tournament, which I don't know if that's the first time that's happened.
Who was it last year? Last year
was Den Bosch.
Yeah, last year Brax got to the final, having done that. So they went through the final 12. But yeah, Den Bosch were clear winners last year. Brax just ran out of legs. I can't remember. I'd have to look through some historical notes. I couldn't tell you that.
In the women's bracket, there was only 2 yellow cards given out, whereas in the men's there was 11. And I think Georgians got the most cards. I think
there's a record they won't be proud of.
I'm sure they got 3 yellow cards in their game against Gantoise.
Yeah, they did. Yeah, it wasn't pretty, but yeah, disappointing for them.
And in the men's, the 2 German teams got the least number of cards.
Wow. And I think the one difference is between the men's and the women's, there is a pure physicality. So not speed of game, just simply size of human being moving at a pace that makes the collisions worse. And therefore collisions in the men's, because of that, can look a lot worse, and actually because of the energy of the impact be a lot worse. And consequently, I think that's where a lot of the cards come from, is because there's a degree of control that almost doesn't exist in the men's, and therefore it is better in the women's. But I also think that's compounded by how the obstruction rule is now interpreted in terms of where the ball can be and where you can carry the ball, and consequently how you can defend against it. So the impact, I think we're encouraging impact, which isn't great, but that's a more philosophical discussion in terms of how I think we should blow certain rules.
That's fair enough. So we'll wrap things up with a couple of awards. So I'd be interested, irregardless of where they finished, who were your favourite teams in the men's and the women's competition?
Who were my favourite teams? For the men's, I'm going to have to go, even though they didn't win, I'm going to have to go favourite team across the entire competition. I'm going to have to go Amsterdam. I just think they had everything. I think they just ticked every box for me, and I appreciate they didn't win, and therefore the Kampong story is a better one. But I just think they were the most exciting team for me as a neutral in the men's. In the women's, that's a good question. The women's competition, it's difficult to see that one outside of the top two, just because of the quality of players. I mean, if you look at the individual moments of skill from players within those teams, those two teams, the moments in their games are going to fill up the highlight reels. So they'll fill up the highlight reels. So I'm going to go Den Bosch as the losing finalist, and I'm going to go Den Bosch because of how they played not in the final, in the 2 games leading up to it. I think the way they understand each other, the type of play the way they play, and I know they were outplayed in the final, but I can't put that down as a classic. So yeah, I'm going to go Den Bosch for the women.
No, I would agree. For the women with Den Bosch. I would say for the men's, I would go Club Campo, purely for the way that they approached every game, going in as underdogs. We're going to put everything at this. We're not just going to lay down. We're going to go for this, and you're going to have to play.
No, that's fair enough. Okay, I'm all right with
that. Then who would you put down as your player of the tournament for men's and women's?
I think the way I'm going to go player of the tournament is I'm going to go for the greatest impact player, the player who had the greatest impact across the entire tournament. And that's actually quite a lot against what I normally argue about when we have this vote for World Player of the Year. And I think in this tournament, it's because the player for the women, particularly, that I'm going to say has been voted for as World Player, but for a specific reason. Actually, I now think she is a player that's worthy of that title, which is Yibi. I think she scores an incredible number of corners, but how she now plays, how she distributes, she's playing alongside a Xander Vard. And Xander Vard, World Player of the Year, either nominee or winner, I can't remember how many times. And they don't look out of place against each other side by side. So I've got to go for her. The impact she had, which she got 4, 3, and 1, or whatever it was across the course of the competition, just stand out as a player. No, so 4, none, and 1, because it was 3-0 in the semi-final. But yeah, I think she was brilliant, genuinely brilliant. From a men's perspective, it's a much harder call. I'm just trying to look down the roster of players that I've got written down. Campo. The first 2 games, Antoine Kino would have been right up there because I thought he was brilliant for Gantoise. Dirk de Wilder, I thought, played really well across the course of the competition. I love him as a player anyway. Obviously, Jonas de Goes as the captain, and then Sander Devine, Seam brothers. I'll turn it back on you, While. I think, have you got a standout?
So, from the women's competition, the 2 that really stood out to me was Matler and Janssen. I think the impact that those 2 had on games can't be understated in the way that they could just turn a game. And so, similar to you, I would go Janssen just for the fact that she carried that right the way through into the final. whereas I thought Matla was kind of counted out of the game tactically and not allowed to have an impact. From the men's side of things, I would go down the route of who created moments in the tournament. So you can talk about how Keena controlled the game and how he distributed, and then the Kasims, the chances that they created, the way they played, and Tellenkamp for just the moment that he forced into the game. So I would probably go Tellenkamp just for the way he carried not the weight of Kampong's attack, but being such a driving force for Kampong in the semi-final and the final.
Yep.
So for me, I would say he was my player of the tournament.
Yeah, and I think I was tending to. Interestingly, I was picking moments the same that you were, and I was going to go. Diane Kassim was right up there because of how he played in the first game, and genuinely was almost unstoppable. But then obviously they weren't successful latterly. So no, I'd forgotten how well Tellenkamp had played. He's not a player who plays to my own personal value set. I think and that sometimes clouds my judgment. But yeah, I'm happy to kind of overwrite my own based on what you've said and go, you know what, Duco Tellenkamp was a driving force. Particularly, what I think is impressive is it's his last season. He's moving on. It would have been easy for him to kind of fade into the background. I don't think he's the sort of player who fades into anybody's background, but it would have been easy for him to go, this is the end of what is happening. So we're in a situation where we'll see how well he can play in his last tournament, and therefore, yeah, to not be invisible, I think is really valuable. So it's a good call.
And then finally, in your expert opinion, goalkeeper of the tournament.
But for the men's, I'm going to bottle it and sit on the fence, and maybe you want to put it out to your community as a vote, because I genuinely think across Payne, Revere, and Calzado, you had three outstanding goalkeepers who genuinely had moments of brilliance that were almost unmatched. And if you look at them game by game, you had that. But I guess, therefore, from those three, and I'm now talking myself out of sitting on the fence, you'd have to go with the goalie who had the greatest impact in the tournament, and that's Calzado. Because they got through that final, they hung on, he made some big saves. And to be fair to him, being in a situation where he's not had a good season, it feels like he's struggled to really settle to get to that point. He's done brilliantly, and to be part of that team that then wins, fair play to him. So actually, you know what, I'll put my money there.
No, I think that's a strong choice. I had Calzado and Payne as my two top runners, because although Amsterdam didn't go on to win, I thought Payne's performance in some of the games kept them in it in a way that probably shouldn't have been possible.
That's fair enough. Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with that. And then I was just looking down the list for the women's goalkeepers, and I thought I like how Chiara Fischer plays for Mannheimer. I'm a fan of hers. If we look at the goalkeepers in the final, so Stixer, I didn't do a huge amount. Zvezdaline didn't have a particularly busy time, so difficult to comment on her. So I wouldn't put her up there based on lack of action. And Den Bosch is pretty similar. If you're in that situation, Koenig, you're going, well, okay, done almost nothing through the course of that competition. So I think it's hard to give it to either of them. If you were looking at who they are over the course of their own careers, then yes, of course, they're at the top of that list. But looking down that, I think, so potentially Fischer is up there. Just try and have a look at some of the stats that I've got down for Maria Tello, for Campo. No, I'm going to go Fischer. I'm going to go Chiara Fischer for Mannheim.
No, I would agree with that. Very much in line with your thought. I don't think you could pick the two goalkeepers that made the final, just because they've had I don't want to say an easy run of it, but they've not had to weather the storm quite as much as some of the opposition goalkeepers had.
Yeah, exactly.
And especially with the women's bronze medal match, I thought that performance was fantastic.
Yeah, that's the one that was sticking in my head. So yeah, that makes sense.
So that, I think, wraps us up, unless there's anything that you want to say that's controversial that'll get you in trouble.
Not on this podcast. There's plenty that's controversial. However, not on this one. I've enjoyed chatting about it. It's always a privilege to be involved in the tournament and then talking about it afterwards with you.
No, thank you very much for joining.
No problem at all. Glad to be here. I'll talk to you again soon.
Stop the recording.